It's 2:30 p.m. on Friday, August 9th, 2024, and it's only 89 degrees with 54% humidity. Cloudy sky. The sun just came out just as I pulled the wires up, and so it was quite cool actually. There was a gentle breeze blowing from the east, and it feels quite nice out here. This is the kind of weather that it's almost hot enough that you go swimming in a lake or a stream or something. Hang out in the shade of a tree and just enjoy the weather. So this is the last move. I'm planning to move them again. Probably should move them this evening or tomorrow morning or something, but we'll be busy with the sheep, so I'm probably going to leave them here a little longer than I wanted to. It's probably okay. This is the same size as that area in the middle of the field where they ate too much. There's more grass here than there was there. And let me just kind of show you what they did the last section. This is the last section they're in. I moved them here early this morning. I think about 7:30 in the morning or 7 or something like that. You can see there's still plenty of grass left. Not much manure. I was hoping to see more manure out here, but I'm not. So I guess they're taking some of that manure and making deposits back in the tree where they like to get shade. Although I don't think the shade really did much or is doing much for today. This area here, they just kind of completely missed it. There's tons of grass there they need to eat or trample or something. So they just missed that. Oh well. Now they don't have to go very far to get water. They just ran out of minerals. I think I gave them minerals at the beginning of this row or a couple of days ago, so I got to get another bag of minerals in there. I don't remember what kind of minerals I gave them. Anyway, I got to get them some minerals. So that's the update. It really isn't that hot, and I'm kind of upset that lots of people have been saying this is like a hot year. It's not a hot year. Maybe up where you're at, it's a little hotter than average. But overall, like, this isn't really that bad. You know, it gets a lot worse. It can get a lot worse. And I think they're trying to build this story about how everything's getting hotter when it's not. They've had to basically take the temperature records for the past couple decades and just invent numbers and make up new things. And to support their hypothesis that we're going to destroy the planet by driving our cars or something, which is just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. There's no science behind it. They just made up some things, and they tell these fairy tales. I remember famously several years ago, Bill Nye, quote, the science guy. I'll talk to you about that in a second, about who Bill Nye really is. Where he did an experiment where he said the carbon dioxide is hotter. And somebody tried to replicate the experiment he did, and there was no difference in temperature. And it wasn't even a demonstration of what they say is happening in the environment at a global scale. So it's just ridiculous. That's young 20 and her calf. Was born about a week ago. I wonder if the calf will still let me touch her. But Bill Nye the Science Guy, I think it's utterly ludicrous and hilarious that he is considered by anyone to be a celebrity scientist. Bill Nye the Science Guy started his career out as an aeronautics engineer at Boeing in the Seattle area. And I don't know why he did this, maybe because he wasn't doing very good at his job or whatever, but he started to appear on a show called Almost Live, which is kind of like Saturday Night Live, but you know, the knockoff for the Seattle area is like 3 guys and a studio and a camera, just doing stuff, making jokes about, you know, local stuff. They're kind of funny guys. And Bill Nye the Science Guy, and they'd always put the science guy in quotes, because he's an engineer, he's not a scientist, right? He wasn't trained to be a scientist. He would come on and do these wacky experiments where he was pretending it was like some kind of educational material, but the experiments would always go wrong, sometimes really badly wrong, you know. And you know, it was funny. It was funny because he's kind of making fun of those science shows. Don't avoid me. Oh, my heart's broken. She doesn't like me anymore. Anyway, so he's a comedian. He's always been a comedian, and I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, he made a TV show that was supposed to be the new science show, for PBS, public broadcasting, right? Which in the US, PBS is like where all the liberals and hippies hang out and create content to try to persuade Americans to believe in their stupid ideas, right? And so he made science shows there. It was just run-of-the-mill stuff. It was all boring. A lot of it was inaccurate, and if you go back in time and watch his shows again, you'll see that he got a lot of it wrong. Because, scientists are often wrong. They're guessing on a lot of stuff. They don't know for sure, But it was really funny because when the transgenderism stuff started up, where people were talking about, what's a boy or a woman or whatever like that kind of stuff, they pulled up one of his old science show that it clearly explained there's only two genders, and so they're using his previous statements on his science show, and so that scientists disagree with the pop culture, and they're trying to rewrite American society and the Western world and culture. And you got to ask, what are they trying to do? What's their big goal? The goal is obvious. The goal is so obvious I don't even have to spell it out for you what they're really trying to do. Like, why would anyone want to mutilate the genitalia of children and put them on hormone blockers and things like that? The answer is so obvious. I don't have to spell it out for you. If I did that to my calves, you would accuse me of all sorts of crimes against nature. And you would say, what are you trying to do? What's your purpose? Why are you doing that to your calves? And there's only one answer. The only reason I'd be doing that is well, you figure it out. Why would I do that to my own calves? We do neuter the bulls because we don't want them to reproduce. We intend to slaughter and eat them. We intend to use their leather and their bones and other things for our benefit. They are an animal that we consume. Now, the question is, why are they doing that to human children? Why are they encouraging them to basically do the same procedure and emasculate the men, and then do the same thing to women so that women can't bear children? So anyway, but yeah, Bill Nye the Science Guy, it's hilarious stuff. But he did an experiment where on YouTube or something like that, where, hey, this is global warming, and then you try to do the experiment at home and you realize that he actually falsified his results and lied about his procedure. And not to mention, the whole experiment itself was flawed from the beginning as not being an accurate representation of what's really going on. There's a wonderful paper. If you're scientifically minded and you want to understand the beginning of knowledge, of wisdom on this topic, it's called The Falsification of Carbon Dioxide as a Greenhouse Gas. It was published decades ago now, probably a decade and a half ago now. And Ehrlich is the name of one of the authors of the paper. And what's funny is he doesn't do any original research. He just takes like statements out of textbooks, and he cites other papers and other research that's been done a long time ago. And he points out systematically every interpretation that any scientist has ever made about what global warming is and what greenhouse gases are is erroneous and non-physical, that nature herself disagrees with their conclusions. And it was kind of funny because he exposed how the whole global warming thing started with this guy named Arrhenius. That's Arrhenius. And who he was kind of a crackpot scientist back in the 1800s, when people were starting to figure out how thermodynamics and thermal physics works. Arrhenius was supposing that if you change the content of the gases, that you would get some kind of weird reflection effect of heat or something like that. And of course, he was totally disproven wrong. There's another scientist back in the 20s where he did a series of experiments to, falsify or validate, or whatever you want to say, Arrhenius's findings. Arrhenius had no findings to begin with. He had no measurements. So this scientist, just kind of in his spare time, he did some experiments and he showed how the greenhouses actually work, and that changing gases doesn't do anything. And it doesn't have anything to do with the frequency of the radiation or anything like that. That has no effect on it. if you're wondering how heat transfer works, when you have two systems, okay, and they have energy inside, and those two systems more or less talk to each other, it's not like they're not actually communicating any intelligent thought. But when they become intermingled, what happens is energy will flow from one body to the other according to a strange set of rules that has barely anything to do with the amount of energy in each system, right? And so energy will flow from one system to another, and we call that heat. So energy flow due to a difference in temperature is called heat, right? And so then the question that people have is, well, what about different methods of heat transfer? And you're like, well, yeah, I mean, you can change how long it takes to come to thermal equilibrium if you adjust how the heat is transferred. But the heat is transferred nonetheless. Eventually it comes to a thermal equilibrium. And in the case of the surface of the Earth, the principal method of transferring heat is not radiation. And you can even remove radiation, it wouldn't make a difference. If you were to get rid of radiation as a heat transfer method, it would not change the heat transfer. It would still occur, maybe slightly slower, maybe slightly quicker, you don't know. It doesn't really make a big difference. But, and again, I think I'm one of the few people in the world that can explain this because my job isn't on the line. But the long and the short of it is that the way that heat is transferred in the atmosphere is by a process called convection. And what convection is when fluid, gases or liquids are called fluids, when a fluid physically moves from one location to the other, right? And you might understand convection in the form of wind, which I'm feeling some wind right now. You can probably hear it in the microphone. And that's how heat is transferred. That's the principal mechanism of heat transfer in the atmosphere. Okay, so when the surface of the Earth is hotter than it should be, and the upper atmosphere is cooler than it should be, then you get energy transfer in the form of convection, not radiation. Radiation is a very small part of that. And you can do experiments where you remove radiation and you can see how the heat transfer changes and all that kind of stuff. But the long and the short of it is that we have carefully measured how the heat transfer changes when you change the composition of fluids, of gases, of liquids, or whatever. And we have carefully measured what happens if you were to replace the atmosphere or add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And the answer is that carbon dioxide behaves thermodynamically almost the same as nitrogen and oxygen, which nitrogen and oxygen makes up like 99% of the atmosphere. Okay, so the point is that if you add or remove or change to carbon dioxide, it doesn't change how the heat transfer occurs because we've scientifically measured how carbon dioxide behaves compared to how nitrogen and oxygen behaves, and they're virtually the same, right? And this is careful experimentation done under careful conditions, controlled conditions, and done repeatedly. And you can do these experiments at home for yourself. You can measure the heat transfer of carbon dioxide and nitrogen and oxygen. It's not hard. You can do an experiment where you add a slight amount of carbon dioxide to a volume of air from the atmosphere and see if the heat transfer changes. It does not, okay? This nonsense about heat rays and reflection or refraction or diffusion of light is nonsense. It has nothing to do with how heat is transferred, with how temperature is, what temperature is, and how temperature works, and all those kind of things, right? So you can take that to the bank. You can take that to the bank. If you don't believe me, go look up in a material science book the thermal properties of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and oxygen, okay? And if you don't believe me that the atmosphere is 99% nitrogen and oxygen and only a tiny fraction of a percent carbon dioxide, you can go look up in any book that'll tell you what the composition of the atmosphere is, It's like 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, and the rest is mostly argon, There's really hardly any carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at all. It's a trace element, I think a long time ago, I did a video where I explained to you kind of visually like how much carbon dioxide there is in a volume of air. And it's ridiculously tiny, right? It's like 1 part in 10,000, somewhere in that order, you know. So if you had, like if you took the air and separated into like gallon containers, right? Only 1 in 10,000 would have pure carbon dioxide. 7,800 would be nitrogen, 2,100 would be oxygen, and maybe 1 or 2 would be carbon dioxide. That's it. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. Have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.